I wish to challenge our faith today and ask us the question: if we were confronted with an impossible situation, would we be able to believe that our salvation is an easy thing for the Lord? So let's consider a time in Israel's history where the armies of Israel were about to fight the armies of Moab, and they had been wandering through the desert. They were thirsty and obviously tired, not in the best of shape to be going into a war. The kings are thinking, hey, maybe this is not going to work out. Maybe we've been delivered by the Lord into the hands of Moab. One of the kings asked the question, hey, why don't we call in one of the prophets of the Lord and see what he has to say about things? So the prophet stands up and says, this is what the Lord has said, make many cisterns in the valley. You will not feel any wind or see any rain, but this valley will be full of water, and you and your cattle and animals will drink. And oh, by the way, this is an easy task for the Lord. And as a light anecdotal note, he will also hand Moab over to you. So consider yourself a soldier, and you're on the Israeli side, and you're thirsty, and you're tired. You've been wandering through the desert. The Moab army is larger than your army, and you're thinking this might be the end. But this prophet says, you know what? We're going to dig some holes in the dirt. God's going to fill it with water. You're going to drink, and then you're going to defeat the army, and this is very easy for the Lord. Would you have the faith to believe the word of that prophet, right? Put yourself in that position and think about, would I really have the faith? Why did Elisha and Elijah, we'll talk about him as well, why did they have so much faith? When we consider the things that they saw, and I think this is key, as Jehovah, the God of Israel, lives, before whom I stand. They spent their time standing before the Lord. They didn't spend their time sitting watching movies. They did not spend their time listening to secular music, right? They spent their time before Jehovah God, right? Also, what do we know? He explicitly says that God lives. Now, if he lives, that means he's also active. If I'm spending time in front of God, and I know who God is, and I also know he is active and he's alive, well, then I might come to the conclusion that digging some holes in the desert and then expecting him to fill with water, well, I might suspect that that was an easy thing for the Lord to do. Continuing on, we have a very similar phrase. Elijah says, as Jehovah of hosts lives. He's living and active, before whom I stand. And again, a third time, this is Elisha again. So, as Jehovah lives, before whom I stand. Before whom are we standing? If we have faith, we don't have faith, I think that comes down to a lot of before whom am I standing? Am I listening to worldly music? Am I busy standing in front of worldly movies? Or am I standing before the living God? Right? We need to be spending time with God in order to have the faith that quote moves mountains. Now, Elijah and Elisha, they were absolutely amazing prophets. They saw amazing things. They saw people healed of leprosy. They saw people raised from the dead. They called fire down from heaven. Well, that's kind of an amazing thing, I'd say. They saw wonders and miracles in terms of eating, where the food didn't run out. They hit people with blindness and then made them well again. Right? These are the kind of things that they saw, but I think they had the faith to produce these kinds of results because they were spending their time in front of Jehovah, the God of Israel, who lives. Now, this is an example, okay, as Micah says, so he's given an example of him standing before the Lord. He says, I saw Jehovah sitting on his throne, so he's having the spiritual experience, and he is, at least spiritual speaking, in the throne room of heaven. I saw Jehovah sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him on his right hand and on his left. Isaiah had a similar experience. Ezekiel had a similar experience. Now, we don't see that from the text, but it stands to reason that Elijah and Elisha had similar experiences. The Apostle John had a similar experience where people are transported to the throne room of God. Now, not everybody has this, okay? Not everybody gets this experience, but that doesn't mean that we just throw our hands up and say, well, I guess I'm just not going to have faith. Because we do have this verse. Colossians 3, I think, is absolutely critical. And if you've watched my videos, you may have seen this come up a few times. If then ye were raised together with Christ. So if we have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated on the right hand of God. Set your mind on things that are above, not on the things that are upon the earth. Because we can either be thinking about things in heaven, or we can be thinking about things on earth. And that's why I say we need to be spending time with God. We need to be thinking heavenly thoughts and not filling our heads with earthly thoughts, right? And I think this is one of the keys to having great faith, to see the things that Elijah and Elisha saw. And if we want to see those things, then we have to be busy about standing before Jehovah who lives.